Let's paint this beautiful lotus pond in watercolors. This is a line and wash painting, so we have pre-drawn the lotus pond with pencil and we're using a fine liner to outline this lotus. Fine liners are perfect for this kind of drawing because they are waterproof, and since we will be working with multiple layers, the color from the ink will not bleed into our watercolors. Let's paint the flower with a wet on wet technique. So I'm going to make the entire lotus damp with clean water. I'm using a Roubloff size 3 aqua synthetic brush which has long bristles and a fine tip. The first color we'll be using is rose quartz from White Nights. I'm diluting the color a bit and start applying the color from the center of the flower outwards. We'll keep the center of the flower darker and the outer parts of the petal a little more lighter. So this will be the first color, and spread it gently to the other petals that are in the second layer as well. Next, using a clean damp brush, lighten the colors on the outer petals. So I'm just dragging in the pigments from the outer petals inside towards the center of the flower. Let's mix nickel azo yellow from Core Watercolors with rose quartz to create a kind of peach color, and we'll use this color to paint the outer parts of. Let's use this color to paint the outer parts of the petals. We are trying to keep the inner part of the flower darker and the outer parts a little more lighter. We'll be working with multiple layers on this flower to get that soft, beautiful floral look. Next, let's mix rose from White Nights with rose quartz to paint the center part of the flower. I'm not going to drag this too much into the outer parts of the petals, just to make sure the outer parts of the petals still remain light. I'm just going to drag 1 or 2 strokes onto the petals just on one side to give depth to the flower. I'm going to dilute rose quartz now, and I'm going to paint the second flower with this color. Next, let's add some peach color on the outer parts of the petals to make them lighter. I'm already having peach color on my palette, so I'm using the same color. If you do not have it, you can again mix some nickel azo yellow with rose quartz to create the peach color. Now for a second wash, I'm going to dilute the rose quartz with rose mixture, and I'm just painting it on one side of the petals. We do not want the first layer that we painted to be completely hidden. So when we're painting the second or the third layer, we still want the layers that we painted earlier to be visible through it. Now I'm darkening the center areas of the first flower. I'm trying to keep these shades closer to the center. I'm going to use the same color to gently paint on one side of the petal alone on all the petals. We're not going to completely cover the entire petal, but we're just going to keep these paints only on one side. I'm repeating the same steps for the second lotus flower as well. So we're going to keep this pink and red mixture to one side of the petal alone. Let's go with another wash. We'll try to darken the center even more so that the contrast between the outer parts of the petal and the center of the petal is more pronounced. So I'm darkening the center of the flower again with the same mixture of rose and rose quartz. I'm trying to gently blend it into the center sections and dragging a few strokes into a few petals on the sides alone. Repeat the same steps for the second flower as well. Let's allow the flower to dry completely, and then we'll start giving darker tones to the center of the flower again. Let's start painting the leaves. The leaves are also painted using the wet on wet technique, so I'm going to make the leaves damp with clean water. The first color that I'm applying is sap green from White Nights. This is a fine tip brush from Roubloff, which I really enjoy using. It helps you to paint the parts that are really hard to reach. Now our first layer of painting is done for the leaves. I'm painting nickel azo yellow on the upper sides of the leaf. The paper is still damp, the leaves are still damp. The colors are bleeding beautifully into the sap green that we had painted earlier. Next, let's add English red on the upper parts of the leaf. I'm going to paint Payne's Grey on the parts of the leaf that are closer to the flower, and also I'm going to drop a few dots of Payne's Grey on the leaf as well. This will add a lot of depth to the flower and the entire painting. I'm repeating the same steps for the other two leaves as well. I'm adding a bit of Payne's Grey with English red to paint the stem of the lotus flower. This will give you a dark brown color. In case you do not have these exact colors, you can start with the colors that are available with you. I'm using a size 6 round brush from Roubloff to make the background damp. We'll be using a wet on wet technique again to paint the background for this lotus pond. We'll try to keep the area around the lotus lighter and the outer parts a little more darker. The first color that we'll be using is sap green from White Nights. I'm using the same size 6 brush from Roubloff. This has a pointed tip, although it is a big brush, so it helps you to get to the small parts really easily. The next color I'm using is a mix of nickel azo yellow with sap green. It gives a beautiful light green color. The next color I'm using is a dark color, which is blue shadows from White Nights. This is a granulating color, and we'll use this color to paint the outer parts of the background. As you can see, the tip is really pointed, so I'm able to get to the small parts really easily without changing my brush. I'm darkening the blue shadows a bit on both sides, as we know watercolors dry much lighter. The next color I'll be using is royal blue, which is again a pastel shade from White Nights, to paint the lower parts of the background. As you can see, I'm not going very fast, but the background is still wet. This is because I'm using a 300 GSM 100% cotton paper from Fabriano. Now let's start painting the lake. The lake is also going to be painted completely using the wet on wet technique. The first color I'm going to use is green shadows, which is a granulating color from White Nights. I'm adding a bit of Payne's Grey with green shadows to paint the upper parts of the lake. Let's start painting the reflection of the flower. We're going to paint the reflection using rose quartz. I'm pulling straight lines downwards. Remember, while painting shadows, the area where the shadows have to be painted should be still damp. So we need to work a little fast while working with shadows. We do not want the paper to dry up, otherwise that will lead to hard edges and it's quite difficult to produce this hazy shadows which you're trying to create. Now I'm going to go with the second layer with rose. Again, the beautiful rose color from White Nights, which is a bit darker than the rose quartz. Let's pull a few lines downwards with royal blue that we had used on the lower side of the horizon line. Now we'll just have to build the layers so that we get the beautiful reflection on the water. I'll be using a mix of blue shadows, a little bit of Payne's Grey, and rose rose quartz to get the beautiful reflection. Let's add a little bit of shadow under the leaves with a mix of Payne's Grey and green shadows. I'm pulling some lines from the shadows that we had just painted under the leaf downwards to add some depth to the painting. This part shouldn't be painted with this dark color, so I made a mistake here. So usually if there is a mistake, this is what I do: apply some water on that area and with a clean cloth just dab that area so that the color comes off. I'm repeating it a couple of times so that the color comes off. I'm using Payne's Grey on the upper part of the leaf, and now that the leaf is completely dry, we'll need to add a bit of water to blend this color into the other parts of the leaf. Next, let's add a little bit of nickel azo yellow to the flower petals to add a glow to the flower. I'm adding a very diluted wash of this nickel azo yellow on the outer parts of the petals, and as you can see, it's adding a beautiful glow to the lotus. Mix a bit of English red into rose and let's darken the center parts of this lotus. It is still damp. Mix a bit of Payne's Grey with English red, darken the center part of the flower a little bit more. As you can see, this will add a little more depth to the flower itself. We're going to repeat the same steps for the second flower as well. So I'm going to darken the center with a bit of rose, add a bit of yellow for the glow. Now let's add a bit of English red in the center and gently blend it. Mix some black into the paint spray and darken the lower sides of the petals to add more depth to the painting. As your painting comes to life, remember that every brush stroke is a step on your artistic journey. Don't stop here, let your creativity flourish. If you are a beginner inspired by this lotus pond creation, don't hesitate to try it for yourself. Grab those brushes, mix those colors, and dive into your own masterpiece. And hey, if you enjoyed this tutorial and want more such creative inspiration, hit that subscribe button below. Never miss a chance to explore, learn, and paint together. If you recreate this painting, don't forget to tag me on my Instagram page, Jacinta_Art. Here are a few paintings that I thought you might be interested to watch next. Thank you so much for joining. See you again in the next video.